Echoes in the Dark. Chapter 1: The Arrival. I had always been a seeker of truth, a chaser of shadows that many deemed too elusive or frightful to pursue. My name is Alex, a journalist by trade and a skeptic by nature. When I first heard about the old Henderson house, perched like a brooding specter on the outskirts of Willow Creek, I scoffed at the tales. They said it was haunted, cursed by tragedies long past. But I saw it as a chance to craft a story that would ignite imaginations and maybe, just maybe, rattle my own disbelief. The house stood, a relic of time, its walls worn and windows like vacant eyes staring into nothingness. As I stepped through the creaking door, a shiver trailed down my spine, not from fear, I told myself, but from the chill of the autumn wind. The inside of the house was a maze of shadows and silence. Dust lay thick upon every surface, and cobwebs draped the corners like tattered curtains. I ventured deeper, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. The air was heavy, as if it carried the weight of untold stories. As evening approached, the house seemed to awaken. Floors groaned beneath my feet, and the faint rustle of movement whispered from the darkened corners. I laughed it off, a natural response to the settling of an old structure, nothing more. But as night fell, my skepticism began to waver. Shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, and the silence was broken by inexplicable sounds, soft thuds, a distant weeping. I found myself glancing over my shoulder, my heart quickening at the slightest stir. It was then, in the dim light of my lantern, that I noticed something beneath a layer of dust on a decrepit bookshelf. An old diary, its pages yellowed with age. Curiosity piqued, I opened it, and the words written in a hurried scrawl beckoned me into the depths of the house's soul. Chapter 2: Whispers in the Walls. The diary felt like a relic in my hands, its pages brittle and stained. The entries were dated back to the late 1800s, penned by someone named Eliza, who, it seemed, had once lived in this very house. Her words were fraught with a mix of excitement and fear, detailing her life and the odd occurrences that began to plague this residence. I couldn't help but be drawn in by her story, feeling a strange connection across the chasm of time. As I read, the house around me seemed to respond. Floors creaked more insistently, as if echoing Eliza's restlessness penned in ink. The wind howled, finding its way through the cracks, carrying with it a sorrowful wail that sounded almost human. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but Eliza's words suggested otherwise. She wrote of a presence in the house, an unseen force that grew stronger by the day. Objects moved, doors slammed shut without cause, and cold spots appeared in the dead of night. Reading her experiences under the flickering light of my lantern, the line between past and present blurred. A sudden chill swept through the room, causing me to shiver. It was then I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible, like a sigh lost in time. I froze, my rational mind grappling with the impossibility of the situation. The whisper came again, a soft plea, "Help me." I stood up, lantern in hand, my skepticism crumbling under the weight of the inexplicable. The house was no longer just a setting for a ghost story, it was a character, alive with the echoes of its past. Venturing further into the house, I felt Eliza's presence growing stronger. The diary in my pocket felt like a talisman, a link between her world and mine. I needed to understand the source of these disturbances, to uncover the truth hidden within these walls. As I ascended the creaking staircase to the upper floors, the air grew colder, denser. The house seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. I reached the top, and there, in the dim light, I saw it, a shadow, distinct and unmistakable, moving across the wall. My heart raced, yet I was compelled to follow. The shadow led me to a closed door at the end of the hallway. Hesitating for a moment, I gathered my courage and opened it. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, but as I stepped inside, a sense of profound sadness washed over me. This was Eliza's room, I realized, the heart of the mystery that held the house in its grip. I raised my lantern, casting light upon the forgotten remnants of a life once lived. And there, on the floor, was the source of the whispers, a locket, gold and tarnished, bearing the initials E.H. With trembling hands, I picked it up, feeling an immediate connection. The room grew still, as if waiting for me to unlock the secrets it held. I opened the locket, and inside was a portrait, a young woman with a haunting gaze, Eliza. It was then that the house began to reveal its true story, a tale of love, loss, and a curse that bound Eliza's spirit to these walls. I knew then that my night in this haunted house was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I believed about the world of shadows and echoes. Chapter 3: The Heart of the Haunting. With Eliza's locket clenched in my hand, I felt a connection to the house that transcended time. The portrait of Eliza in the locket portrayed a young woman with a gaze that seemed to pierce through the veil of years, beseeching understanding and compassion. I could no longer deny the reality of the situation. There was something supernatural at play, and I was inextricably part of it now. I returned to Eliza's diary, seeking answers. The entries became increasingly frantic and sorrowful. Eliza spoke of a forbidden love, a union opposed by her family. She wrote of secret meetings, stolen moments, and a love that defied the conventions of her time. But it was the final entries that chilled me to the bone. Eliza had been with child, a fact that would have brought scandal and shame upon her family in those days. The diary ended abruptly, with a final, heart-wrenching entry. Eliza lamented her fate, fearing for her unborn child and the wrath of her family. The entry was dated just a week before she was found dead in her room, the official cause declared as heart failure. But the words in her diary hinted at a darker truth, a secret that had been buried within these walls. I looked around Eliza's room, now seeing it as a sanctuary of her love and sorrow. It was as if the room itself mourned her, the air heavy with the echoes of her despair. I had to uncover the truth, to bring closure to Eliza's tormented spirit. As night deepened, the house seemed to come alive with spectral energy. Shadows danced along the walls, and the faint sound of a lullaby filled the air, a haunting melody that resonated with loss. I followed the sound, drawn by an inexplicable force, down the hallway and into the depths of the house. In the lower levels, I discovered a hidden room, sealed behind a false wall. The room was a time capsule, untouched for over a century. Inside, amidst the dust and decay, were remnants of a nursery. It was here that Eliza had prepared for her child, a child that never had the chance to be born. The truth was becoming clear. Eliza's spirit was bound to this house, trapped by her unfulfilled life and the secret that led to her untimely demise. Her love, her loss, her despair, it all resonated within these walls, an echo of a life cut tragically short. I knew what I had to do. I needed to find a way to free Eliza's spirit, to bring her peace. The locket was the key. It symbolized her love, the very essence of her being. I had to return it to its rightful place, to complete what had been left undone. With determination, I made my way back to Eliza's room. The house trembled around me, as if sensing the impending release of its long-held secret. In the room, I placed the locket where Eliza's heart would have lain in her eternal rest, hoping that this gesture would be enough to break the chains of the past. The moment the locket touched the floor, a gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing my lantern and plunging me into darkness. I stood there, heart racing, as the temperature dropped, a palpable presence enveloping me. Then, the soft light emanated from the locket, growing brighter, illuminating the room in a gentle glow. The air shimmered, and before me, Eliza's apparition appeared, her expression one of peace and gratitude. She reached out, a spectral touch that felt like a whisper against my skin, and then, with a final smile, she faded away, the light with her. The house groaned, a sound of release, and then settled into a profound silence. I knew in that moment that Eliza's spirit had found peace, her story finally told, her love and loss acknowledged. As dawn broke, I left the Henderson house, a changed person. My skepticism had been shattered, replaced by an understanding of the mysteries that lay beyond the realm of the living. The house, once a place of haunting and sorrow, now stood silent, its echoes quieted, its secrets finally at rest. Chapter 4: Echoes Silenced. As I walked away from the Henderson house in the early light of dawn, the world seemed different, as if I was seeing it through new eyes. The experience within those walls had changed me fundamentally. I had entered a skeptic and emerged a believer, not just in ghosts, but in the profound power of unresolved stories and unspoken truths. The town of Willow Creek was just waking as I made my way through its quiet streets. The house, now behind me, stood as a silent guardian of its own history, no longer a beacon of mystery and fear. I couldn't help but glance back, half expecting to see a figure in the window or the flicker of a candle. But there was only stillness. I arrived at the local diner, a place that had buzzed with rumors about the house for years. As I sat down with a coffee, the waitress, recognizing me from the day before, approached with a curious gaze. "You're back from the Henderson house," she said, more a statement than a question. They say no one stays a whole night there. Did you see any ghosts? I smiled, thinking of Eliza and her story. Let's just say the house has a lot of history, I replied, choosing my words carefully. Word of my overnight stay in the house spread quickly, and I was soon surrounded by locals eager to hear my story. I shared with them the history I had uncovered, the story of Eliza and her tragic love. I left out the more unbelievable parts, knowing they might be too much for a morning coffee crowd. But I emphasized the importance of understanding and respecting the past, of acknowledging the stories that linger in old places. My article on the Henderson house took a different tone than I had originally planned. It was no longer a skeptical investigation into a haunted house myth, it became a narrative about a young woman's lost life and love, and how the echoes of the past can resonate in the present. I titled it Echoes in the Dark, the True Story of the Henderson House. The article was well received, sparking interest far beyond Willow Creek. It seemed that Eliza's story, once confined to the walls of the Henderson house, now reached a wider audience, bringing her existence and her plight into the light. In the weeks that followed, the Henderson house became a topic of historical interest rather than fear. Historians and paranormal enthusiasts visited, but no more strange occurrences were reported. It seemed that Eliza's spirit had truly found peace. As for me, I continued my work as a journalist, but with a new perspective. I had learned that every story, especially the ones shrouded in mystery and whispers, deserved to be told with empathy and understanding. The haunted house on the outskirts of Willow Creek was no longer a place of fear and ghostly tales, but a monument to a time gone by, a reminder of the stories hidden within old walls. And sometimes, on quiet nights, I would find myself thinking of Eliza, hoping that wherever she was at peace, her story told, her voice finally heard.